So, what is some evidence that materialists and scientism priests, maybe if you want to call them that, are beginning to lose the fight? They're drifting toward that inevitable historical obscurity that will eventually happen to all of them, that the tide is beginning to turn, and that despite their foothold in modern society with their philosophies that keep us down in the gutter, unable to progress, unable to adopt new forms of science, unable to evolve, and participating as useful idiots for probably more powerful forces, do keep the planet really, really stupid. What is some signs that maybe they're losing the fight? Well, here's one area of evidence, and this is when psychology today comes along and blasts materialists, blasts scientism, with an article written by a Steve Taylor, PhD, who is also an author, and I think there's going to be some info about his books in this article. And so the article is called Scientism, When Science Becomes a Religion. And look, you don't have to believe in an afterlife, or you can be kind of in the lukewarm territories of the stuff we talk about on this channel, and still recognize that anything that goes against materialism as a philosophy is attacked by these people. And it's not just science, academic circles and science festivals like this guy went to. It's basically the whole subreddit r/science, very large circles of these sheep-like people who just preach this narrative and take pride in what they view as their rationality, while forcefully, aggressively promoting an agenda to shoot down anything that goes against this agenda, this idea that materialist philosophy, which is the only things that exist, amount to matter and the properties of matter, which means that any instance in the history of the world, despite all of the accounts of psychic abilities or precognition or premonitions or remote viewing, and the list goes on, heavily verified, subjects taken dead seriously by governments. There's white papers on CIA.gov promoting these things, that every single instance throughout history must all be wrong, because if there was even one instance of any of that being real, then the entire structure of the materialists would collapse in on itself. So the only way they can fight back is by being aggressive, attacking people, being bigoted, forcing people out of academic circles, etc., etc. And people are beginning to wake up to it. So let's read the article a little bit. Last year, I was invited to take part in a debate at a popular science festival. Skip ahead a little bit. He enjoyed his time at the festival talking about discussions about physics, biology, and cosmology. However, what disappointed me about the festival was that there was a sense of dogma pervading the air. Ironically, some of the attendees and participants of the festival reminded me of some religious people, in that they saw the world through the prism of a set of beliefs and displayed hostility to any alternative perspectives. There was a sense that we, the attendees of the festival, were the rational ones who were in possession of the truth, or at least working towards it, in contrast to others who were irrational and deluded. Sounds just like the entire Reddit science subreddit. There was like tens of thousands of subscribers on that subreddit, and if you even hint at something that isn't strictly materialistic, you will be either banned from the subreddit or just attacked. Like, there's those YouTube videos of introducing the wrong queen into a beehive, and all the bees just swarm and kill the poor queen. Within seconds. It's basically the same thing happens on the internet. If you try to say, hey guys, there's this author named Dean Radin, kill him, you must be destroyed. basically how it goes when you go into these materialist circles. In particular, the speakers were disparaging to religion and, quote, New Age spirituality. From time to time, they would mention telepathy, scientifically proven, homeopathy, which actually has a very strong scientific basis behind it. I was going to see if I can grab my book. Where did I put? Oh, yeah, yes, I talk about that a bit in this book that I wrote, going into some of the DNA experiments and finding out that water actually contains information, specific DNA information that can be copied through non-physical means. Point is that homeopathy, scientifically demonstrable, or other types of, quote, pseudoscience. They've been using that terminology since I was a kid, debating these topics on Usenet groups 22 years ago. They're still saying pseudoscience, or woo, as the speakers refer to it. And it just, there's something kind of desperate about these, when materialists come together and they use terminology like woo, because that term has been around for a while, and it's clearly abused. It's clearly an abusive term. It represses or suppresses information. It's used to denigrate or destroy people's personal experiences. It's used to chase people out of academic circles. And so there's something just cringy about it. And I think people who are in touch, they know that it's cringy. And this is why, we're seeing mainstream articles begin to call this kind of stuff out. The audience would respond by applauding their criticisms or murmuring with hostility. Man, it's creepy. The speakers also seem to feel, and let me just back up a second. It's funny because I'm not a big fan of New Age, but that's part of the hostility. It's kind of like the woo label, right? So they're not, so when I think of New Age, I kind of think of groups that just accept all the information without applying any kind of critical thinking, and just accepting whatever they hear. Like, oh, this channeler says this must be true. This channeler says this must be true. This medium said this. Oh, look, let's buy some crystals and do this, and and spend all my money on over here. And that is a problem. That's kind of how I see the New Age genre, and I think a lot of people see it critically that way. But what they're doing is they are disparaging the whole spectrum of, I guess, supernatural metaphysical topics, using whether it's New Age or woo, right? So they say they use that against itself, right? The fact that there is a New Age genre doesn't mean everything New Age is bad, but it has adopted a bad reputation, and it's politics, so they'll do whatever they can to smear using this terminology, right? So it's a bit like in politics, they will make a label, they will dirty it, right? So if, for example, and like neoconservative, and of course, I'm not a big fan of the neoconservatives, but it worked very effectively because neocon became a slur, right? So you call somebody a neocon, and it's like, ooh, that's a really tough thing to call somebody because it represents all these really bad things. But there was a time when being called a neocon, that was hip, and it was the new brand of conservatives who believe in imperialism and aggressive foreign policy. But there was a time when that was acceptable, and then clever politicians were able to craft it into an insult. I mean, it's the same thing with New Age. Anyway, I don't mean to get off base. Let me get back on base, back to reading the article. Oh yeah, by the way, you're watching Afterlife Topics in Metaphysics, where we do defend the new science, and I will not rest until materialism is a philosophy that we can collectively laugh at. I will not rest, and if you support that concept, and go down and hit that subscribe button, that notification bell, like the video, share the video, and it helps keep this thing going, helps keep my mission going. So to continue, the speakers also seemed to feel that they were engaged in a common enterprise which would lead to a better future for the whole human race. Utopianism. The utopianism of secularism and meaninglessness. What a utopia. A future in which human beings will be free from the ignorance of superstition and are able to understand the workings of the universe. So what would that utopian vision mean? And I want you to think about this, and I can make other videos about this, because it would mean that, being free from superstition, it would mean outlawing metaphysical, transcendental, higher consciousness experiences. It would mean a society that rejects anybody who has a near-death experience and immediately sends them to the psychiatric hospital. That were out-of-body experiences, you'd never be able to talk about them. You met your deceased loved ones, they came in, or your dying loved one was having a conversation with his parent. You'll never be able to talk about it. This utopian vision is like some kind of insane Marxist, just something crazy out of like the Soviet Union, where it was, you weren't in the Soviet days, you were not supposed to talk. Everybody was supposed to be a good little atheist, and you weren't supposed to talk about supernatural things. And this is like, that's basically what these guys are promoting. Pretty freaking scary. Do you want these people coming to power? Do you want politicians coming in like that? Just think about that next time you're voting. Who would want authoritarian, extremely secular ideology? Because that, could be leading to something like this utopianism, which is terrible. It's never going to work, I don't think. But it's just something to think about. So anyway. And we're able to understand the workings of the universe. One speaker, a well-known UK scientist, I wonder if it was a Dawkins, maybe, probably not, remarked that there will still be that there were still some areas of science, some areas that science didn't fully understand, such as consciousness. But he said, we're making significant progress, and I have no doubt we'll get there eventually. It's so funny because I've been hearing this since the 1990s. The materialists have been saying this. We'll get there eventually. We're making progress. I literally heard this, again, I mentioned since like 1999, I was like 12 and 13 years old. I have been debating these subjects. Began in Usenet groups. Got interested in out-of-body experiences. I was reading some of my brother's books by Robert Monroe. Got really interested in the subject around that age. Began debating the subject online. First, really as kind of a materialist skeptic myself. Then my positions changed and became more of like a middle ground supporter. Then I ended up debating materialists and skeptics on like all Usenet, out-of-body, and places like that. Just like I do now, except my grammar and writing skills maybe were not as spiffy as they are 20 years down the line. But back then, when I was reading articles about this type of thing, they were saying the same thing, right? So how much longer are they going to be making significant progress, and soon they'll figure out this whole consciousness thing, adapted to the materialist structure, right? And it's fun. It's fun to watch them squirm. So scientism as a belief system. It may seem strange to talk about science in these terms. Science is supposed to be neutral and objective and free from beliefs. The role of scientists is to investigate the structure and laws of natural phenomena and to conduct research and advance knowledge. Science is ideally an open-minded and open-ended process where theories are continually tested and updated based upon evidence. It's true that there are many scientists who work diligently without pondering over the philosophical implications of their work and without consciously adopting any beliefs. It's also true that some scientists are genuinely open-minded and willing to revise their beliefs when confronted with evidence. But as the Science Festival illustrated, for many people, science has become associated with a particular worldview, which is often maintained and defended in a similar way to a religion. Religion of materialism. This is the worldview of materialism, which holds that matter is the primary thing in the universe, that anything that appears to be non-physical, such as the mind, our thoughts, consciousness, or even life itself, is physical in origin, or it can be explained in physical terms. Materialism holds that human beings are just biological machines, and that the only purpose of our lives is to survive and reproduce. It holds that anomalous phenomena such as spiritual experiences, near-death experiences, or psi phenomena are brain-generated illusions and can be explained in terms of fraud or coincidence. And it's the laziest idea, and it's just it's laughable, really. Imagine, I've read hundreds of near-death experiences, and the materialists will look you in the eye and say they're just making it all up, because they're too scared to do any real in-depth research. They just want the subject banned and outlawed. They want some kind of totalitarian Marxist government to come in and just prevent people from talking about the experiences, and then they can continue to have the power, or continue to give the power to the people that these people are useful idiots for, who they work for, which I would probably call something like the deep state, who benefit from humanity's ignorance. Materialists are particularly opposed to psi phenomena like telepathy or precognition, which they see as anathema to science, a throwback to a pre-enlightenment world of magic. An alternative term for this belief system is scientism, since it is a paradigm that has been derived from some of the findings of modern science, as psychologist, I'll never pronounce this right, Iman Barus has described it. Science is an open-ended exploration of reality based on logical thinking but empirical observation. Scientism is the adherence to a materialist version of reality that confines investigation to those sorts of things that are permitted by materialism. One of the characteristics of dogmatic belief systems is that their adherents accept assumptions as proven facts. And this is certainly true of scientism. For example, it is a fact that consciousness exists and that it is associated with neurological activity. But the assumption that consciousness is produced by neurological activity is questionable. See this article of mine. So there's another article that is, I guess maybe comes from his personal website. It is a fact that evolution has taken place, but it's questionable assumption that evolution can be explained wholly in terms of random mutations and natural selection. Very good point. Let's skip ahead a little bit. So, he makes some very good points, very good examples about, how there is real evidence for many of these topics. And essentially, materialists will dismiss anything as based upon some kind of unexplained fraud. So they have faith that something is wrong before they even know whether it's wrong or right. Which is it's a very religious type of way of approaching a subject, right? Because surely a truly scientific approach would entail engaging with the evidence and examining it on its own terms, accepting the possibility that if the evidence is convincing, theories may have to be revised. But in this case, in his example, it's done in a religious context. So it's a long article. I'm going to put the link in the description down below. He goes into psi phenomena, and these extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, a common mantra we hear, magical thinking. So yeah, there's a lot more here. I'd recommend checking out the article yourselves. And so the big point here, it's on Psychology Today. Why is it on Psychology Today? Because materialism is a mental health disorder. Or I should say it's a common way that humans, join clans and cliques and look for acceptance and form religions, and it's being done even in the name of being anti-religious, which we know can and will turn into religion as well. It's very ironic, and it's funny when people don't see this when it's happening. And it's also interesting that an ideology can be based upon the kind of the backbone of being opposed to a different group, an out group, which you see in religions and you see it in cults. The people who support Wu, the supernaturalists, people like myself. And my feeling toward all of this is that, you're to the people who may be watching, if you are a materialist, you are losing the fight. A lot of smart people out there who will literally say, I'm a materialist. There's a guy on YouTube I watch, smart guy. I watch all his videos, political analysis, things like that. But he's a self-described materialist and enjoys that edgy connotation that, he believes in hard rationale, cold logic in science, and, he's quick to put down anybody who has any kind of whether belief that they've had a supernatural experience. And as I explained at the beginning of this video, to maintain this religious perspective, you have to you're faced with a continual onslaught of evidence that, if just one incident turns out to be true, there could be 1,000 cases of precognitive dreams. And when you research this area, it kind of looks like many of them are real. But let's take 1,000 and say 999 are not real. There's just one that's real, then materialism is dead. So imagine having to keep fighting that fight. But many of them don't fight the fight, they're just lazy. And I encourage you to share this video and send it and piss off your materialist friends and let them watch this. And I've been getting stressed lately because there's frankly been a lot of idiots in the comment feed lately. And, actually for this, I welcome more idiots. If you are a materialist and you want to somehow defend yourself from this attack, then go in the comments and let's hear what you have to say. I'm looking forward to it. I want to see just how you can keep this position going, because maybe, just maybe, I can get through to some of them and realize, what they're doing is they're hurting society. They're really causing a lot of damage. They have been for a long time, and the materialist religion, it needs to fade out. It has had its time, and it needs to go away because they are useful idiots. There are other groups that benefit from mankind's ignorance, and these are powerful groups that know that even the materialists are not right, but you can gain a lot of power when you have access to the real science, the true science. For example, think very practically. A corporation hires a remote viewing firm, like let's say John Vivanco. He has some great books, A Corporate Remote Viewer, really interesting guy. A corporation hires a remote viewing firm that works. They will have access to extraordinary information and a huge competitive advantage. If the materialists can work to convince their competitive company that such things are impossible and hogwash, and they do not hire such a remote viewing firm, then they will be making themselves vulnerable to the corporation that does. That's the kind of stuff that really happens. And as one example, and I think this kind of stuff happens on much, much bigger levels, like I mentioned, the deep state, the forces that want to keep us in the dark, for using that same concept but on a much bigger scale. And so all these useful idiots with their PhDs hanging out in universities and grading papers and being the arbiters of research papers and journals, they are diligently working to keep this thing going, but as the tide changes, it's time for really what has to happen is more of them need to leave this religion behind, especially when they find that you can have a happier and healthier life personally when you give up materialism, because religions are all about lifestyle as well. What does it do for your lifestyle? Mormonism, they believe magic underpants and some other planet, and Joseph Smith, and he had all his wives, and a lot of just funky stuff in Mormonism. But you hang around Mormons, and they're super happy, and they have a big community, and they go to these big domed-looking churches. We had, at least back in one of my hometowns out in Arizona, eastern Arizona. We meet all the Mormons. They were never too pushy, trying to convert us. They're just a happy community, and they all looked out for each other. And it was like, okay, we'll take the magic underpants, whatever. It's nice. It's a nice community, and you just, it's kind of makes sense. Like, it wouldn't be the end of the world if I married a Mormon girl and had to pretend I was a Mormon. Materialists, you don't get those benefits. You get to say you're in the in-group. You get to feel smarter. You get to be a bit smug. But the philosophical and community angle, it doesn't go anywhere. It's a belief in nothingness, nihilism, pointlessness, existence is meaningless. These are tenets. So it's married to consumerist materialism. So just make as much money as you can, do the rat race, compete, get ahead of everybody else, die with the most stuff, and then that's the purpose in life, right? And what I'm hoping is that more materialists will realize that, their materialist cult is not serving them. It's actually hurting them. And then that's one way that the tide will continue to change. And why this article was on Psychology Today is because really it is a psychological condition to adopt something like this. And that's how we have to frame it as well. Well, that's it for this video. If you like my rants, I have a lot in written form, books like this one, The Afterlife and Beyond, chronicling the objective evidence of life after death. You can get involved in the group Afterlife Topics at Metaphysics. I also do coaching if you want to support my work and my research, cheap, and I help teach people about having out-of-body experiences and contacting deceased loved ones and things that I do on a weekly basis that have greatly benefited my life on psychological levels and emotional levels, many things. Or you can become a patron at patreon.com/afterlife topics, whatever you want to do. It's also a way to work with me personally. I always take time out for patrons, as well as making custom videos or joining the classes online. We have classes that go often twice a week with behind the scenes for guests that we bring on the show, and a lot of stuff like that. Well, anyway, this is Cyrus. Thanks for watching this, and I'll catch you guys on the next video.